call to order the Hingham School Committee meeting of September 10th, 2018. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on June 18th, 2018.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Libby, thank you. Any discussion?
I do have 3 comments on the June 18th. On section 4, we need to add the name of the parent, who was Jamie Kenny, I believe. So we have names of all the other people who spoke. And then also I would request that the statement that Michelle read be referenced as one of the documents for the meeting. I don't think it has to be, well, I'd like either the statement included in the minutes or at least it referenced as a document, because I think it was a powerful statement, and just by saying in the minutes that a statement was read, I don't think necessarily relates to the issue.
So you're talking about just listing it under the documents that were
Yeah, and then
discussed at the
so that
meeting.
there's some connection to it at some point with the minutes.
Could we just include it right in there, because it wasn't that long of a statement?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I have a problem, though, because we've had statements read by school committees in the past that were not included in the minutes. Unless it was included somehow in the packet as an actual document, then I see including them in the minutes. I do know that Michelle had, didn't you post it afterwards, or you sent it out?
I did not. It's
as
on
an
the
email?
I did not send it to anybody. It's on the website.
It's on the website.
Oh, it is on the website?
It is on the website.
It is, so
yes.
there is
Okay.
a form of it, but
Okay,
in
if
that
it's-
meeting.
If
it
it's on the
was-
website, then I'm okay with it. But,
Just in the past, we haven't included statements from school committee members,
Unless it's in the packet.
which has
That
never
would-
happened
no.
either,
Oh,
so.
okay.
well, if it's in the packet, then it's
Then it
one of
would
the
be part of-
documents,
right.
then it's
That's
part of the
right.
record. So, I don't know how other people feel,
I
but.
don't know,
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I mean, as long as it's out there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on the website.
All right.
Okay.
And then, in section 9, under long-range planning, I'd like that to be clarified, that, it was recorded that the district has received 1/3 of the money, and I'd like it to be said designated for Plymouth River School from the Beale Street Project Development Agreement with the town.
I'm sorry, John.
I think that, you know, in that statement, I don't think it was reported that the district received the money, but that the town received the money. Okay, the town
Yeah.
has
Town has
the
received-
town
Yes.
has received approximately 1/3 of the money. The district has received nothing.
Okay, well then
Okay,
that's better
you know,
clarification.
Right, right, you know, so,
So keep going. So the town has received approximately 1/3 of the money
Associated with the,
associated with.
it was the Alliance property.
Yeah, it's,
Right, the Alliance
Yeah.
property.
I just want to know what you read.
it's
that's
the
all.
development agreement,
With-
then I'm looking into it. Okay, so then it should read, it was reported that the town has received approximately 1/3 of the money associated with the Alliance project?
Well, the Beale Street
Beale
project's
Street
good.
project, okay. Okay, do we want to, I mean, it's related to Plymouth River, it's, the point of making the statement is related to Plymouth River School, but
Right, were we talking about Plymouth River, or? were we
Well, that's why
talking-
Carlos brought it up, was because
Right.
it was with the reference to Plymouth River School. So,
Well, you might say associated with the Beale Street project, which is in the Plymouth River School District.
or we could say associated with the Beale Street project, which includes funds for Plymouth River School.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm not sure if we're
I
trying
don't
to
know that we
capture what
said
was
that,
said at the
though.
meeting as
Yeah.
opposed to what, what was sort of reported, right?
I was trying to capture why it was reported, because
Yeah, there wasn't.
since it's related to the schools, if it's not related to schools, then
Right.
why is this being?
And I forget if they called it mitigation money. I forget what they called it for
It
money.
was
but
part of
I-
the
yeah.
development agreement. Okay, well, at least we should change it to the town has received. But we don't know when we're getting.
No, well, right, we don't, we don't know, but when I learned that, I was told that the money's sitting in a gift account and that we should be receiving the other 2/3 within the next 6 months. But never was there any discussion of when we'll be given that money. I think that'll be more like a request by the school committee to say we want to do this and,
Okay.
And we'd like to use those funds, for this purpose.
Okay,
That's what I think will happen. I don't know, though,
okay. Then can we just change it to, it was reported that the town has received the money?
Approximately
And then we
1/3.
don't have to
That's
add
the only
anything
change.
else?
Associated with the Beale Street project, yeah. And with the remaining funds coming in
Thank
the next
you.
6 months, I think that's good.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
We're just switching district to town.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Any other comments, changes to the minutes? Are you good, Liza?
Yep.
All right, so all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great, thank you. Motion, do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on July 23rd, 2018?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on July 23rd, 2018.
Thank you. For a second. Thank you, Carrie. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have 2 comments. On section 6.8, can we add school year after the date? It was like 2018, 19. It should say school year. And then.
There's a 6.8?
Mhm.
It does say school year.
Yeah, mine says school year.
Yeah, mine does too.
No, it was voted, it was voted
Oh, it's voted.
to
Okay,
approve
yes,
the
yes,
homeschooling
okay,
of Elizabeth
gotcha.
Breen
Under the
for
vote.
the 2018-19 school year.
Homeschooling for the 2018-19 school year. In the vote, it's.
Yeah. Pam, I'll let Pam know. I don't. She's structured.
All right.
That's like a typo. And then on section 8, again under long-range planning, no offense to Carlos. The sentence starting with Dr. Gallo noted that those comments weren't necessarily long-range planning related, but they were like a update on budget planning or budgets. So can we add a different, like another section?
Can we just add a couple of returns after? I
Yeah,
don't
add a
want to
return.
create an item that wasn't there, but I can just drop it underneath all the other reports and have it just be a sentence on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Dr. Gallo?
because it's part of the
Yeah.
subcommittee project reports. And then,
Yeah, Carlos asked for that. He said, Dr. Gallo, anything new with the Chapter 70 funding? I think that question came from Carlos, if I recall correctly.
Oh, it
You know, and
did?
that, yeah, Carlos had
That's
just
right, yeah.
asked, you know, before the meeting ended, for Dr. Gallo, do you have any updates on the Chapter 70 funding? And I think that's how those issues actually came out,
Okay,
if I recall correctly.
okay. All right. Okay, then you can leave that. But then, where it says Board of Selectmen, Mary Power will be coming to the next meeting to discuss the town's plan relative to this increase. I didn't believe that's why she was coming. I thought she was coming relative to the town's finance and long-term capital planning, not just about the increase in Chapter 70 money.
Right, but I don't recall anyone saying that. And that isn't how I understand, what I understand she's going to talk about tonight either. So I'm not sure where that came from.
Yeah. I think it'd be
That's
appropriate to do a couple of.
It's my note taking.
I
So I can
think
go
it-
back and adjust. I can say what-
Yeah.
whatever reflects the discussion of the committee, but I want
either-
to make sure that it reflects the discussion of the committee.
May I make a suggestion?
Go back and
Yeah.
I
watch the
think what we
video.
should say, I think that we should just say, the last meeting was, and then get it away, and Dr. Gallo noted there was an increase in district chapter funding, and another
Two
space.
thoughts, maybe, yeah.
Board of
Yes, 2
Selectmen,
thoughts.
Mary Powell will be coming to
Right.
the next meeting to discuss the town's financial plan.
That's fine.
Period.
Yep,
That's
perfect.
fine.
Right, but, you know, space, sentence, space,
Yeah.
sentence.
That's
So
fine.
separate.
It may have been that we said something to the effect, perhaps Mary could answer that question when she
Yes.
comes next, but I don't specifically
What did you say, the
recall
town's
that.
financial plan?
Yeah.
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 sounds
Yeah,
good.
it is definitely the financial plan.
Any other,
That was it.
all right, any other, Carrie? Yeah?
That was also under, it was also under, long-range planning. And it was just at the very end, It was, Carlos had inquired whether there had been any news on the MSBA grant application for foster school, and said no answer was expected until the fall.
So I'll add that in. Okay. Did you get? did everybody
It's
get that?
actually December, but,
Well,
right,
the
or is
meeting,
it-
there's a meeting at the end of, normally at the end of November, and I think what we
Okay.
said we wouldn't expect to hear
Right.
in this
I'll go
past
back
year,
and
we
rewatch
heard
the
in
video
December.
to
Okay.
refresh my memory.
Yeah.
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 And the winter starts December 21. I mean, we'll know somewhere early November, we'll get a call of some
Okay.
sort to give us
All
a
right.
feeling of like, hold off, or, you know, wait, we're coming, or something like that. It may not be the full board disclosure, but sometime in, you know, first couple of weeks in November, we expect to hear something.
okay.
Thank you. All right, so are we,
Well, do you want to pause until I can go back and bring you a new edit? That, because adjusting what's there versus adding a new, that's fair. I just want to make sure whatever I give you is representative of your discussion. So would that be reasonable, just to pause approval of this until I can get you a new draft?
That's fine. I was taking notes at the same meeting because Kate wasn't
I'm
there.
not arguing, I
so-
just
but
want to
yeah,
make sure that I
that's fine,
do my
yeah.
due diligence to ensure the record is reflective of the discussion.
okay, perfect. All right,
Yeah.
so do we need a,
We'll take a vote then at the next meeting.
take a vote at the next meeting?
So
Okay.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, somebody second it. All right, so the motion's been withdrawn.
I just want to make sure it's
And we
right.
vote on those minutes at the next school committee meeting. All right, so item 2.3, minutes of the Community Outreach Subcommittee meeting held on March 19th, 2018. So, just to clarify, the reason that we have to approve the subcommittee meeting minutes at this meeting is because there aren't enough current members on the Community Outreach meeting that were out at the last meeting back in the spring. So I was there and Kay was there, so we
So
had to
I'll
bring
make
these
a
to you.
motion to approve the minutes of the Community Outreach Subcommittee meeting held on March 19th, 2018.
And I would second that
Okay,
motion.
and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
And then the
carries.
rest abstain.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 3, questions and comments from the audience are always welcome. Is anyone here with comments tonight? No? All right, well then we will move on to item number 4, our superintendent's report for the beginning of the school year.
So we had a smooth start to the school year on September 4th for grades 1 through 12 and September 6th for kindergarten and pre-K as well. And when I say a smooth start, it was that in terms of the operational things. Teachers were all in place and the students came and we had very good attendance. The buses, remarkably, we had no issues on that first day, which sometimes buses are late and as might be expected, but that was not the case, and food services went well and all was smooth. I think there were a number of parents who called me to task by saying, well, it wasn't so smooth because it was too darn hot, and certainly it was hot. It was hot in all of the other communities that started school. I felt some relief that we didn't have 2 weeks of that hot, humid weather, because schools that started the week before certainly did. But it was hot, and I think credit goes to all the kids who endured that, and all of the teachers who endured that and tried to make it run smoothly. And so I did get 2 letters from parents that had a concern about that, and in both cases they were advocating that we buy portable air conditioning units for classrooms. There are spaces that are air conditioned in all of our schools, and there are spaces like the office, the library, auditorium at the high school, computer labs, and so on. So our teachers, many of them were, particularly elementary level, very creative about saying, well, we're going to the computer lab for a computer lesson. That was a break of sorts that they tried to create for the kids. But with respect to the issue of air conditioning units, which the portable ones that either are window units, which really don't fit most of the kinds of windows that we have in schools, or the portable ones that sit on the floor and roll about, they never were designed for classrooms that today run from 950 to 1,150 square feet. Those are the guidelines that MSBA has, and so it wouldn't be practical to purchase those for the few days that we have typically in June. It's very seldom. If I've never in my experience had a period of 3 or 4 days as we had last week. We haven't had that experience. Nevertheless, the other issue is that air conditioning units have a tremendous draw, and we have an electrical system that's fragile at best at Foster. When I say fragile, I don't mean that it's not functioning. It is, but we need to keep that in a functioning order until we can do something about that building, working with MSBA. So it isn't something that we could recommend. Definitely not something that Doug and his crew would recommend, even if we had the money to do that. So I did acknowledge both of those letters. I think I sent copies of my responses on to Michelle. But I do want to note that there were concerns about the heat. We had on Wednesday the superintendents in the area, and there were roughly 30 or 40 of them that communicate in weather-related things, such as typically would occur in the winter. And everybody was asking the question of themselves and of the rest of our peers about whether or not, there was a consideration for canceling school or for doing a shortened day. And the consensus was that nobody was planning to do that. And one of the big reasons, and one that's particularly relevant in Hingham, is there was even an article in the paper recently about how working parents struggle all summer to try to find appropriate daycare for their children, and the concern was about the number of release days that schools have. So to me, the notion of either shortening the day or canceling the day on Thursday was largely that this is not something that would easily be accepted by the majority of parents who are the majority of our parents, and that this was a temporary condition at worst. So But other than that, things went very, very smoothly, and I think we had a productive week, albeit, perhaps activities that were a little different from what was planned. With respect to the enrollment, not all of the data came in today for me to be able to give you the monthly report that was due today, but we did have call-ins last week, as we typically do. We have our secretaries in the buildings call in the enrollments on Tuesday and on Friday, and then they send the information down today. So based upon that, the high school enrollment was just about flat, one different from last June, not from last October, from last June at 1,250 students. High school enrollment and middle school continue to be somewhat in flux as they try to track down kids that they haven't yet heard from or that haven't yet appeared, but nevertheless pretty flat. At the elementary level, there was a difference of only 7 students fewer than last year, and again, that's the June figure, and that is largely a function of the fact that, in terms of our projections anyway, that the kindergarten enrollment grew, which is something that doesn't typically happen over the summer. Normally, our kindergarten enrollment is what it is when people actually sign up during the enrollment period in the spring, and it's unusual that we would have 4 more students. So I will update that report, because I think the kindergarten report is something that people want to see as accurate. So I will, over this week, update the report that's on the website and make sure that people understand that it has been updated. I don't know that any of the recommendations or the conclusions that at least I drew from that report will be different, but it still is important to have the numbers. So kindergarten enrollment is 285 as we speak. The middle school, there was a loss of 52 students. I shouldn't say a loss, it sounds like they disappeared. But the difference between the number of students who moved on to the high school and the number of incoming students to the middle school, 5th to 6th grade transition, was accounted for most of that. And then we also had some out movement at entering grade 7, and that largely is that the consequence of the parochial high schools around that are now starting at grade 7. So we have some kids that leave us at grade 7 rather than grade 9. So overall, over the 13 grades, a 58 student reduction. And at this point, we're sitting on 1 fewer elementary classes than we had, even though the elementary enrollment is down by only 7 students at this point. So I expect to have those other sheets in from the school tomorrow. So perhaps when I send out the packet for Saturday's meeting, I can include that in writing so you can see it. But overall, not a lot different from what we anticipated, that it would be down by a bit, and that being down would mainly be at the middle school level, and that elementary and high school are pretty flat. Vacancy and hiring, we thought we were all set at the start of school, but we do have 1 teacher who is on a maternity leave who was planning to come back and then decided that she would be out for the rest of the year. So we have posted that job and advertised for it, and we will be filling that with a contractual person who is licensed, as opposed to the shorter term sub that we had in place. So we're pretty well set there. 2 other categories we will finalize on Thursday at Administrative Council, and that is we had posted for the special ed liaison roles, 1 for each school, and we'll get an update on that from the principals on Thursday. That's a stipended role, was approved in the budget, but it would go to existing teachers. And the other were the math tutors that we put in place this year, 30 hours in each building. Those were posted late, and so we expect an update on Thursday about that. Other than that, We continue to be hiring, and you can see from the number of new hires that you have in the back of the packet. We have, of course, the teacher ones, which we've been very public about, but we have this year an extraordinary number of turnovers of paraeducators, and that's largely because we have a very educated paraeducator force. Many of them are young folks who have their degrees and have their licenses and are hoping for a teaching job, and many of them, in fact, work for us for a year or two and do get a teaching job, sometimes with us. But it does mean a lot of turnover in that particular category, and that happens every year, but it tends to happen at the end of the summer. And the reason for that is that we may know we need to have some turnover and hire early, but the principals are really reluctant to hire someone for a para job in June and then find that that person has a teaching job offer later, and we would have to go through the process again. So by design, the principals, knowing that we have a very strong para pool in town, do tend to make those hiring judgments later in the season. So, and we do have in the packet the update from Doug and Katie. I anticipated it would come today, and it did. So it was added to your packet, and it's the typical report of what they have accomplished in August and what they're planning for September. And a lot of it, again, is preventive maintenance work, which is terrific. They've got a lot of that done over the summer in some of the projects. There's one thing there that may be sounding complete in the list that they're anticipating to be done this month is the poured surface for, it's the south playground. That isn't mentioned in their list, so know that that's the south playground. So we've done the East School playground, we'll have done the South School playground. Ed is working with Long Range on a plan to try to get some support from CPC for the Plymouth River playground, and we're hoping not to ever have to deal with the Foster playground issue, because we're hoping that by the time we get to that aspect of our plan that we will have a different building and playground there.
Libby is working very hard as well.
Oh, Libby, well, I said long range planning, so anyway, that's where we are on that. And on the last thing that we can vote under 48 hours, I explained under communications, and that's that we got a memo from Katie Roberts on Friday, and Katie is looking for permission to dispose of some outdated elementary science text. And they're outdated not because they have incorrect information in them, but because they don't reflect the current Massachusetts standards. So they're not books that we would have any use for. However, Katie, being Katie, not only comes to us with a request, she comes with backup information, and she has a plan for getting these texts to a school in another country that can really use the information and doesn't have the same standards that we have. And this disposal would be conditional upon Katie and others raising the money to ship the books to that location. So when we come to that article, 48 hours, we would request that you take that vote. And it's not a matter of urgency as so much as it is the fact that we don't have another meeting till October 1st, and so they want to get going on the fundraising to be able to ship the books somewhere else. And that's it.
Did you have communications?
Excuse me?
Did you have communications?
That was under the communication,
Okay.
unless I have more. Did I have more? No.
No, okay. And,
I told you about the 2 letters that I did
Yes.
receive. They were addressed to me, and I don't typically bring all of those communications to you, but I knew someone would say, you didn't mention how hot it was, and I am mentioning it. It was hot, but we all survived, and I think we're in good spirits.
yes. Thank you. All right, 5.2 is student communications, but I think Emma is not here. I'm guessing first week of school, not too much to report yet back from the students. 5.3, I don't have any other communications unless anyone else does. All right, so we'll move on to item 6, new business. Item 6.1, to hear the town's financial update by Mary Power, Board of Selectmen, who is here with us this evening. Welcome, Mary. Thank you. Come on up. We didn't start the overhead yet. We figured we'd reduce the amount of unplugging and plugging.
This is, maybe as this is just warming up, I'll, sort of, first of all, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I think we've, I'll see if I can do this.
Maybe we could leave the light on until Mary can see.
I think I'm good. I think,
Okay.
I just saw a prompt up there, so hopefully that screen will come up. I think we've been, thank you for having me tonight. We've been talking a lot about, you know, a lot of the long-term capital projects in the town, and over the past several months, our board has been doing some work, and what we thought would be a helpful thing to do is to bring this information to the various boards and committees in town that are contemplating large capital projects. And I'm going to start by saying that we still have an awful lot of questions to answer. There's still a lot of questions to answer, but I think our feeling is right now that as this data and some of this information is starting to inform our thinking, it would be a good idea to share it not only with all of you, but with the community as well. And I think with your planning session that's upcoming on Saturday, I hope this will be helpful background as you begin that work. So what are we going to talk about? A little bit of background. We've done a little bit of a debt analysis with some help from a model from the advisory committee. We've done a little bit of work of what happens when we take on new debt as a town and next steps. And you know, every time, this is probably the 6th or 7th time I've presented this, and each time I present it, I think, okay, there's still way too much detail in here. So I've tried to pare this back a little bit, but I will tell you that the entire presentation was presented to the board on June 5th. So if you don't feel like you're getting enough numbers and enough detail from me tonight, there is more if you want to watch the presentation, and the full presentation is also available on the website. And just to start to kind of clear the stage, we're not talking about the water company tonight. And the reason that we're not talking about the water company is because the potential purchase of the water company will not affect our moving forward on other municipal projects. And what you see in the middle of that screen is a copy of a slide from the town's financial advisors from a presentation they made a couple weeks ago. And two things happen as the town is contemplating the water company. First of all, the town has a debt limit. Our debt limit is about $300 million. And right now we have about $68 million out against that. If we were to buy the water company, the purchase of the water company does not count against that debt limit. So that's because, and part of the reason is because the revenue generated by the water company, the ratepayer bills that we would all pay, would go towards paying the debt service. So no tax impact to the Hingham taxpayers with this proposition, and it's not going to count against the debt limit. Again, if you're interested, there's all kinds of information that's on the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee page. But just as a little bit of background, I think all of you know, we all talk about our AAA bond rating, and I think it's worth noting that of all the communities in Massachusetts, only about 6% have a AAA bond rating from Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's. And we're all very proud of that. And you see some of the quotes down below. And these are quotes from the rating agencies, and these are reasons why we have and we've maintained this bond rating. It has to do with our management, our liability profile, our budgeting practices, and the fact that we're really chipping away at a lot of our long-term liabilities. So, you know, that's something that I know we all pay close attention to. I think from the Board of Selectmen's standpoint, we consider ourselves kind of stewards of the bond rating. So many of the decisions that we make, we kind of run through the lens of the impact on the bond rating. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of kind of 4 things that the rating agencies look at, one thing they look at is fund balance, our rainy day fund. What you notice is the red line. Our fund balance right now, our total fund balance is over $30 million. The unrestricted, which is the true rainy day fund, is at about $25 million. The advisory committee has a financial policy, and right now, our unassigned fund balance is a little bit above that upper limit. That's a good problem to have, particularly as we start looking at some of these capital projects, because one possibility is that we might want to apply some of that surplus as sort of a down payment on some of those projects. The advisory committee, the town financial policy also looks at the amount of debt we have. If you think about your household budget, you don't want to have a whole lot of debt in your budget, and the black line that you see is the town financial policy, and actually this year we are right at where we need to be with debt service. There are times when our debt service is above the financial policy, times when it's below. But again, the rating agencies pay attention to that, because if they see a trend kind of moving in one direction or the other into perpetuity, that's when they get a little bit nervous. They don't want a community to be overextended. They also don't want a community to be ignoring its long-term obligations. So in some ways, a very low debt service number is just as much of a cautionary tale for them. Our pension liability, we're about 2/3 funded with pension. We have a 30-year schedule. We're on track with that, and every year in the budget we put away money for pension. And the other liability that we have is OPEB, and that stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That is health care for retirees. Up until about 10 years ago, we used to pay all retiree health care out of our budget. So it was just another bill. We pay we pay salaries for teachers, we pay salaries for police officers, we pay health care for retirees. As the number of retirees gets larger and people live longer, we understood that if we kept doing what we call pay-as-you-go, our retiree health care benefits were going to start to creep up to be about 25% of our budget. And we knew that would really put a lot of pressure on the budget. So we were actually one of the first communities to start saving for this 10 years ago. We have about $12 million in the OPEB trust. We're again trying to fund this over 30 years. While we're not as far along on the pension, we're one of the communities in Massachusetts that's pretty far along. And in 2008, some of you may remember that the credit rating agencies put us on watch. And they did that for 2 reasons. One was our OPEB liability, and the other was our fund balance. And that watch was removed, and every year we keep hearing that the fact that we're steadily saving for these things is one of the reasons why we're keeping our bond rating. A couple interesting facts about Hingham demographics. 50% of the households in Hingham have a household income of less than $100,000. And if you notice the red part of that circle chart, 20% have an annual household income of less than $40,000 a year. Now, I think about my neighborhood, and I kind of go house to house, and I say, okay, in this house we have people who are retired. In this house we have, people at different life stages. And so while certainly many of the households that are, have an income of less than $40,000 might be retirees who have planned and managed well, I would also point out that as for many who are relying on Social Security, the Social Security increases year over year usually can't keep up with, the cost of milk and eggs and gas and property taxes. And another really interesting demographic is that if you look by age, in 2010, 34% of Hingham households had somebody in them over 65. And in 2020, that's projected to be 47%. We are, like many communities on the South Shore, we're aging. We also, obviously, as some of our senior living gets fully built out, like Linden Ponds and some other places, we're having a higher concentration of seniors. But I think that's particularly important as we're thinking about a lot of these capital projects, because you know, what that might also say to me is that if our households are aging, we may have more people moving into those red and yellow parts of that pie chart in terms of household income. Last year, in last fiscal year, the average assessed value home in Hingham was $795,000. That would be the average. So there are some houses that are that have a higher assessed value than that, and some that are lower. That is pure and simply just an average. But with the help of our colleagues on the advisory committee, they created a model that's helping us to try to understand, you know, property taxes and where things are heading. And a lot of times we look at the average assessed value home as just a data point. So last year, the average assessed value home was $795,000, and that household had a property tax bill of just under $10,000. So if your house is assessed at more than $795,000, your tax bill was probably more than $98.75. And, you know, I sort of point that out because I think sometimes, I know for me, when I'm looking at budgets, I tend to think about what's different than last year, what's, you know, okay, this is going to be a little bit more. But I tell you, when I saw that $98.75, that number kind of took my breath away a little bit. $10,000 is a lot of money to pay in property taxes. And it's composed of the levy, it's some excluded debt that we'll talk about, and also in Hingham, we've adopted the Community Preservation Fund. And one thing that we don't know, and we're going to have to see what happens this April, but for those of you that are familiar with the new tax law, the deduction for local and property taxes is now capped at $10,000. The limit used to be higher than that, but it's now capped at $10,000. So what that may mean for a number of households across the nation and here in Hingham is that we may lose some deductions on our income taxes. And we don't know whether moving to the standard deduction in the new tax law, you know, for some households, they will benefit from this new tax law, but others may not. And I think that uncertainty is going to be important for all of us to keep in mind this next year as we're talking about budgets and property taxes. I'm not sure that, you know, a lot of us will really understand what that means until we all go to file our taxes. I know right now it feels pretty confusing to me. If you think about the average tax bill is just under $10,000, it goes up by about $250 a year, and that's Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 allows us to increase property taxes by 2.5% a year by law. CPC goes up by 2.5% a year. The levy goes up by 2.5% a year. And if we have any debt, we have a debt schedule, and actually our debt usually declines a little bit. But again, assuming no additional excluded debt or an override kind of every year, again, on that average assessed value home, the taxes are going to go up by about $250 a year. Again, I think that's real important for us to all think about as we think about a project, because there are some sort of built-in increases that are happening with our property taxes. Currently in the town, we have $68 million in outstanding debt, and our debt on the town is usually for 20 years on a project, and that's often because we sometimes don't get to the end of 20 years and there's a major renovation on a building. And what we do as a town is we do something called the level principal payment, which is a way to reduce the interest burden. And essentially what that means is we pay the same amount in principal every month. And so what happens is that the payments decline over time. So if you think about your mortgage is probably a fixed amount. So, you know, you pay the same amount in your mortgage in year 1, in year 10, in year 15, in year 20. With level principal, the first year's payment is the highest. So, for example, when we took out debt on the middle school a couple of years ago, that year 1 debt service payment for the town was the highest. And it drops down by, I don't know, I think it's about $45 every month or every year. We have 2 types of debt. We have non-excluded debt, which is debt that's in the budget. We have excluded debt, which is debt that's outside of the budget. And that's really, the way I think of excluded debt, it's a temporary tax increase. Typically, and again, no hard and fast rules, but typically the non-excluded debt that's in the operating budget is used for smaller capital projects. The high school fields were paid for with non-excluded debt. We didn't ask Hingham taxpayers for a tax increase, we absorbed it in the budget. The middle school is an example of excluded debt. It was a $32 million issuance, and if you think about that, to try to fit that in the operating budget, it would have really, it would have taken up a big piece of the operating budget. And so we have two different kinds of debt. No matter what debt we have, it needs a 2/3 vote at town meeting, and when we have excluded debt, that also requires a ballot vote. So, and that's Massachusetts general law. So right now, we have in fiscal year 18, we have about $4 million of excluded debt, and the majority of that are a lot of the education projects that are so familiar to us. Primarily the East Elementary School, PRS and foster improvements, and the middle school. And one thing I would point out, I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this slide, but if you notice at the bottom, you see some offsets with meals tax reserves. The total's about $1 million. When we built the middle school, we as a town made a decision that we were going to take $600,000 in meals tax every year to use it to defray the cost to the taxpayer of the middle school. And we had accumulated about $2 million in meals tax revenue and decided to apply that over about 5 years. So, sometimes in the budget, people will say, well, we've got a lot of meals tax money coming in. Why don't we use the meals tax money to pay for some of these big capital projects that are coming up? We have to remember that we've already counted on using that for the middle school for the next 15 years. So if we take $600,000 in meals tax money and use it to pay for another project, this part of the budget, the taxes are going to go up. The non-excluded debt that we have in the budget, you see this is pretty colorful because it's a lot of different projects. It's the renovation of the library that was done that was finished in 2001. It's a couple of fire trucks that were purchased last year. We're paying for those over 5 years, not 20. The DPW facility and the athletic fields, the high school field project. So there are a lot of different pieces there, and that debt service in our $100 million budget is about $1.8 million. So now just briefly, we've heard a lot of different capital projects under consideration. And every time I show this slide, whoever I show it to pulls me aside after and says, the number you have for our project, it's too low. So these are some preliminary numbers that were in the warrant. Preliminary, draft. So, we start at the top with foster school with a big TBD. We don't know the timing, we don't know the cost. Just as a frame of reference, the East and the middle school projects are down below and listed, but, really uncertainty there. And we may hear something from the MSBA this fall. The library, some of you have heard that the state has awarded Hingham a $9 million grant towards a renovation of the library. Our accepting that grant is contingent on the town paying for $17 million of the renovation. It's about a $26 million project all in all. And it's kind of like the MSBA. If you want to accept the grant, you have to complete the renovation and the project as specified and submitted. You see the north and the south fire station up there. Both those fire stations are 55 years old. The equipment has changed. The town has changed. The role of the firefighters have changed with emergency management services. And we now have female firefighters as well. And our firefighters are in residence in a shift for 24 hours. So Both of these fire stations are in need of renovation. The building we're in, Town Hall, I think we all have sort of come to the conclusion that there's more activity going on this campus than available sort of building space and parking. In particular, the senior center, it's got about 5,000 square feet of space, and they need 3 to 4 times that even just to service the population right now. The harbor improvements, the wharfs and the seawalls are very susceptible to the sea level rise. And we've had 3 of those 100-year storm events in the last 2 years. There's a sewer pumping station down near the harbor that, if that were ever flooded, would really be consequential. So what we have to do with the wharfs in the harbor is we actually have to elevate them. We have to elevate some of the seawalls. And then lastly, you've heard some talk about the pool. The selectmen last year were supportive of the CPC application, but if you heard us talking about our preference that that a pool project had to be self-funded by country club revenue, one of the reasons is because as we look at this list of all different projects, I think it's our view that some of them are very core essential government services, and others might be a little bit more discretionary. But what's interesting is, if you add all these numbers up and you assume that they're, a couple of them might be a little bit low or a couple years old, you get to $75 to $100 million pretty quickly. And so I want to talk a little bit about what some of our initial work has been with respect to how do we pay for some of these things. So our concept is really, it's kind of like your household budget in some ways. When we have debt that expires, we would maybe take on some new debt. And if you look at that bar chart, it's showing over the next 14 years what's going to happen to our excluded debt. And if you notice, particularly in 2029 and 2030, we retire a lot of debt. So the thought would be, well, what if we just drew a straight line across kind of last fiscal year and said, if we keep that where it is, kind of taxpayer neutral would be the concept. We would still have, town meeting would have to still approve all these projects, but if we were able to do that, we could say to the taxpayers, if you approve this project, it's not going to have an impact on your property tax bill, on this part of it. That would sort of be the concept. Now, if you look at that chart, what you notice is that it really isn't until about 2028 that there are some significant amounts of debt that are retiring. With our non-excluded debt, what we've been doing for the last couple of years is budgeting it flat. So the term we're using is we're creating some capacity, and essentially what we're trying to do is to create some room in the budget so that if a project came along, we would have the ability to pay the debt service without having to tap into another part of the operating budget. And what we've been doing for the last 2 years is we budget an amount, we don't spend it, and we're trying to save it in our fund balance. And again, the concept is maybe if we save enough of that, maybe it could be a little bit of a down payment towards some of these projects. Again, these projects would require town meeting approval. And if you look at the bar graphs, again, what you'll notice is that it isn't until about 2029 that a lot of the debt comes off the books. So I mentioned that the advisory committee created a model. One of the things we sort of said to them was, if we kind of said we're going to borrow, we're going to replace expiring debt with new debt. We sort of said to them, okay, how much debt could we take on that would be taxpayer neutral? And with the help of this model, what this model's given us the ability to do that. And so in 2021, we could, as a town, borrow $9 million, and that would be taxpayer neutral. By 2024, and these numbers are cumulative, it would be $19 million. By 2027, it would be about 26, and by 2030, about 55 million. And again, some of it is excluded, some of it's non-excluded. But I guess when I looked at that, I thought, okay, we got a lot of projects that people are talking about in the next couple of years. And so what that says to me is that anything that we do over the next couple of years that's greater than $9 million in new borrowing would have to result in a tax increase. That would be a tax increase to, for everybody. And, another way to kind of look at that, just kind of visually, is that the bars that you see represent the amount of capacity, and that green bar across the top is the total cost of all the projects. Now, they're not all going to be ready by 2021. Maybe hard to tell when they will be ready. But what this also says to me is, even if I go out to 2030 and think we've got $80 to $100 million of projects, even under the best of circumstances, 12 years from now, we'll only have about $56 million of capacity. And, again, we haven't worked through a lot of the details in this, but this information was really helpful for our board to hear. It was, to be honest, it was a little bit sobering. I don't know if we're here to kind of share the pain or what, but I think to me this was a little different than anecdotal data I had been hearing over time. I had sort of been hearing a little bit that we had more capacity than this, and I think this AdCom model is pretty helpful in quantifying that to a greater degree of accuracy. So a rule of thumb. If we take out $10 million in new excluded debt, again, I'm going back to this average assessed value home, that's about a $100 tax increase. So $20 million of new debt would be about $200. So the AdCom model gives you the ability to plug in borrowing and different times of year. So we just started really simple and said, okay, what if we wanted to borrow $50 million in 2021? We didn't even put a project name on it. Or projects. Let's just say $50 million in 2021, and our financial advisors are telling us that a 3.5% interest rate is probably conservative. We're told if we went out into the market today, we'd probably be in the 2.5 to 2.75 range. But I think for those of you that have been around as we've been doing capital projects, we tend to be conservative, especially if it's a couple years out from borrowing. So if we were to borrow $50 million of new debt, and remember I told you that we borrow with level principal so that the first year is the highest year of a debt payment, in year one, that would be a $517 property tax impact on the average household. Again, if your household is valued less than $795, it would be lower. Conversely, if your home is valued higher, it would be higher. And what you see is that it drops down a little bit from year to year, and on average, it's about $416 per year over the life of the 20-year term. And this is just a visual depiction of what that tax bill might look like for the average assessed value home. And if you go out to 2021, you'll see that that kind of purple-colored bar is the $517 in new debt. But important to also remember that there are other aspects of the tax bill, and that the rest of the tax bill is going up by about $250 in a year. So if we were to borrow $50 million in 2021, all other things being equal at 3.5% interest, the average assessed value home would experience a $737 tax increase. So that's a big bump. It's a very big bump. And what you see is, we take that out about 13 years. So what are we trying to do? What steps are we trying to do? Our board is looking at additional targeted tax relief options, in particular for the most vulnerable members of our community. We've been made aware that the state has given us some tools over the year, and one that we're exploring quite seriously right now is a sort of circuit breaker tax relief for seniors. And This is something that a group of folks, including Selectman Karen Johnson, our Treasurer Collector Jean Montgomery, our Assessor Rick Nowland are looking into. So one of the things that we're looking at is, are there some ways to do some targeted tax relief that might help, again, some of the most vulnerable in our community. We're also in the process of identifying town assets that could defray the cost of these projects. We're looking at, for example, if we have excess fund balance above the threshold, would we want to use that? So if we have a $20 million project and we have $5 million of excess fund balance, then it becomes a $15 million project. Would that be an option? Another thing we're looking at is that we have some parts of our restricted fund balance that can only be used for certain things, and the sale of the Hersey House is one of those items. It's $1.2 million of restricted fund balance, and so it depends around how it could be used, but again, maybe that could help defray the cost. We're also looking at a lot of the town assets that we have. Are there facilities or parcels of land that could potentially be repurposed? So that's an option. We're also looking at grant and funding opportunities, and I know all of you are as well, whether it's grants within the operating budget or grants for capital projects. This year in the governor's budget, there's a good amount of money set aside for harbor resiliency. So one of the things our Harbor Development Committee is looking to do is to try to position Hingham so that we might be able to receive some grants so that $10 million cost to shore up the harbor, perhaps some of our state tax dollars could come into Hingham and work for us. And then I think you heard this last year in the budget, and our board hasn't really talked about it yet, but I think one of the things we felt like last year was, given what's on the horizon, last year we did not feel really compelled to advance the idea of an operating override. We're just kind of aware that for the taxpayers in Hingham, asking for an increase, what we're really trying to do is to lay out the landscape, to talk about what's coming so that people can make informed choices. And as we get into the budget season this year, I think our board is gonna have similar conversations. It'll be interesting to see the conclusion. I just want to close up with somebody sent us a letter, and it was helpful for me to read. She said, "We watched Mary Power's future budget. It does appear our property taxes will go up and up. What about us, the ordinary town employees who actually live here in the town and have supported these projects for years and years, well, all my life?" And it goes on. And, I think we all hear from a lot of our constituents. And I don't know about, all of you members of the school committee, but a lot of times I hear from citizens who want us to be doing more, give it more services. Why can't the library be open on Friday? Why can't the transfer station be open more hours? Why can't we pave more roads more quickly? Why can't we have more sidewalks? Why can't we have police presence in the square to manage the traffic? And, you get them too. You get them too. And I guess what I found was helpful for me about this is that this is a different and yet an equally important voice in the community. And it was a reminder to me of the very difficult balancing act that all of us have with respect to providing services and facilities to meet our programmatic needs and the needs of our citizens, but also making sure that that we're thinking about that with the entire community in mind. So just in closing, I think it's important that we remember that all Hingham taxpayers pay for the capital projects, and I know we all have constituents, and again, your major constituent group are the 4,400 children and their families who you're responsible for educating and transporting to school safely. And the Fire Station Building Committee is charged with the best thing to help with the fire station mission, and the Council on Aging. But my hope is that as we start navigating through these discussions, we're kind of remembering the cumulative impact of a lot of this on the taxpayer. And, equally, I think, it's important to remember that debt isn't free money. Sometimes it kind of goes into the operating budget and it gets bundled into debt service, and we kind of forget about it. But it's not lost on me that there are some major renovation projects going on for facilities in this community, and we're still paying for the last renovation. And, the debt is there, and I think we have to be mindful of that. And I guess the last thing, just looking at it, is that as creative as we can get, I think as we look at all the different projects under consideration, it's my personal assessment that we're not going to be able to find the capacity to pay for them all. There's creative and then there's creative, but I think that's going to force all of us working together to think about the need, the timing, the scope of all these projects. That may mean we need to defer some, we need to maybe say no, we maybe need to do it a little bit differently. For example, with the harbor development, our board asked, instead of doing them all at once, could we do it in 2 stages? Does that, even if there's maybe a cost impact, might that give us a little bit of breathing room? It's why when we talked to the Country Club Committee about their project, we made their CPC grant contingent on their bringing back to us a cash flow so that we could see that the debt for a pool would be self-supporting, because the town is kind of the backstop on the country club. And our board thought it was important that we understand what we're signing up for. So we're trying to do this in a number of different ways, and part of that is also just sharing the information that we have with people, sharing some of the benchmarks, and understanding sort of where things are. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions or any comments that I can carry back to our board. This is something we're going to continue to work on into the fall, and I'm happy to, as I said, answer questions or share perspective with Paul and Karen.
Thank you. That was really very helpful, particularly right before our planning meeting on Saturday. Does anybody have any particular questions or comments or thoughts for Mary? Dot?
Mary, I don't know if you're at liberty at this point to tell us what is happening with the library project and the timing and...
So in July, the state library commissioners awarded Hingham a $9 million grant, and that is contingent on the town securing its share of the funding within a 6-month time frame. Kind of sounds like the MSBA. The state library commissioners also have, there are possibilities that communities can get extensions, because that way, if your town meeting, for example, isn't within that 6-month window, or for other reasons. So the library trustees, we've been having some conversation, and the library trustees the week before last voted unanimously to request an extension to April 30th for this grant. Our board tomorrow night, you might see on our agenda, we have a vote to authorize the chair to write a letter in support. What that would mean is that the question of the library would not require a special town meeting. It could be taken up at the April town meeting. And that was appealing both to the library trustees and to our board for a lot of reasons. And so it very much works like the MSBA program.
Anyone else?
Where does the funding come from for that grant? Is it part of the state budget?
It's
or
part
is
of the
it
state
private?
budget, and the way I understand it, and I'm a little fuzzy, but what I understand is that it is funded approximately every 5 or 6 years. So it's not like the MSBA where there's a certain round of funding every year. Typically every 5 or 6 years, in the state budget, there is a certain amount of money, and then that money can be awarded to different communities over time. So Hingham initially applied for a grant for the library, and in 2017, we were put on the wait list. And this past July, because a couple other communities who had been offered grants turned them down, that created some room, and so some additional communities were invited to participate.
Liza, did you have questions?
Well, and also you had mentioned to me that they get a fixed amount, they don't get a percentage
Right.
of the project,
So
which
it's
is
a nine-
different
it's-
than the MSBA.
Yes, it's $9 million, and so, and I want to be careful that I'm not, I want to make sure I'm not speaking incorrectly, but it's $9 million, so to the extent that time passes, and for example, you know, the project itself has money for contingency and a cost escalator, but unlike the MSBA, because this is a fixed amount of dollars are awarded, not a percentage.
Great, thank you so much, and to the advisory committee too for putting that modeling together. It's
Yeah, we
really-
appreciate
It's really
it.
helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Mary.
again.
All right. Do you need to replug in there? All right. Thank you. All right, so we will keep all that in mind on Saturday when we meet. All right, so we'll move on to item 6.2, to receive the proposed school committee special reports calendar for 2018-2019. And that's in the proposed draft calendar is in your packets. Do you want to have any comments on the calendar, Dot, or just let us?
No, it's a typical schedule of program reviews, which we typically do in the spring to give the departments the opportunity to put them together over the course of the year. And it's the reports that are the school council reports that they have prepared, but that we decided several years ago to be more efficient to hear them over the course of the fall, so that you would know both what happened last year and what they planned for this year. So those are in the spring. And then other kinds of reports, such as the MCAS report and the accountability report that Jamie does. That date is unknown at this point because since we had a different kind of testing last year with all the grades being tested, the results are slow to come back. So we're hoping that date would be met. And then other typical things that we need to be do that relate to mandates, like the superintendent evaluation are in there. So there's not any new category of thing in there. There are 5 program reviews, and we have a chart of the program reviews, and it's an average of every 4 years we would have a report. Sometimes one gets moved to another year because there might be a new person in place in terms of the leadership or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't anything about this schedule that is unusual. It's just that it's getting harder and harder to fit everything in. So I'm trying to move this forward now since
Okay.
I have power.
Does anybody have any
Oops.
questions or comments?
I have a question, and then I have something we all need to add to think about. So my question is March 11th, town meeting warrant discussion? What's that?
Yeah, that is that we know that we're going to have at least one project for town meeting, because we're anticipating that we are going to ask for funding for the roof project at the high school.
Okay.
And so.
I mean the gym.
Yeah, the gym
Windows,
roof.
okay.
And
Yep.
the clear story
Yep.
windows, that whole project. So in fact, the bids came in on Friday. The bids have to be assessed at the next meeting.
Yeah, those are the qualifications, not the
Right.
bids.
Okay.
So just qualifications.
Not the bids in the sense of the amount of money.
Right, there's not money, right, it's a
The
qualification for
responses to the
designers,
RFPs
yes, yes.
have come in, and they don't include a price, but you authorized an amount several weeks ago. So at the next meeting, after the subcommittee takes a look at
Yes, the
at
next
them.
meeting, the next subcommittee meeting will involve interviews of the,
The five, there were five
yeah, we'll select
responses.
3 of them. We were going through a selection process now. We'll select 3 of those. So at the next long-range planning committee on September 20th, we will interview 3 candidates for the designer role. And the designer is the one that will evaluate the project for us, identify any other areas that need attention, design the overall spec for replacing the clear-story windows, and produce the bid document that will go out to contractors, help us put it out to bid, and be there to open the bid so that we can come up with the price for what the project will be by January 20th, so we can include it in the warrant.
And actually, we found out just on Thursday from the department head meeting that we attended that the town, the selectman's office would like to have those potential project warrant items in their hands by the 14th, even though the date is the 20th, and that's so that they can get them vetted by the town council and make sure the wording is accurate and so on. So the only reason for this is that we anticipate we're going to be putting something in as of January 20th. But then there's a closing date somewhere in March for the final wording, and it's really more a placeholder in case we need to reconvene to talk about that, certainly that project which we anticipate. We don't anticipate at this point having to do anything more if in fact we're accepted by MSBA in the fall, because we've already allocated an amount of money, but it's really just a placeholder, reminding us that we may need to have some discussion at a meeting about what we have proposed for a warrant.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean that in the fall that, that,
So it's actually the town meeting warrant presentation discussion,
well, that could be part of it as well.
as opposed to, because if we're gonna have a discussion about whether or not to put a warrant in, we have to do that before
Well,
January
yes.
20th.
Right, but this, I'm thinking more about the closing time with the language, the final language.
But you're saying that would have to be done earlier.
Well, doesn't the advisory committee write the final?
Meeting. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
it
more
goes
the
through, it does go
presentation
through a
for-
collaborative process,
Yeah.
really, they'll write the thing. We, at that time too, after we open the bids, the school committee may say, give a preliminary award conditional on funding in April of, who that selection will be. So there will be discussion that we'll have relative to this
Okay.
project after the next 2 meetings in, February and March. One of those.
Right.
We will have to make that
Okay.
sort of formal award conditional upon receiving funding at the April town meeting.
Okay.
And in fact, after we find out the figure, even before January 20th, we may need to have discussion at another meeting. That's always a possibility. So that really is there as kind of the drop dead date about talking about town meeting
Okay.
and the warrants.
And that's true, and we may have
Items.
to have this discussion, because I do know, in meeting with the designers, we had a walkthrough with the designers that were putting in their qualifications for selection. And the project we want to do is put Calwall in the high school, because we have that product in other places, and it is the premier product, the good one to put in there. But the lead times for getting Calwall and the award to the vendor, may not coincide with our April town meeting and award, right? So we may have to sort of, do a conditional type award saying, we're doing this, in the event that we don't get funding, we'll pay this amount of money. Go ahead, order the Calwall, or else we won't get the project done next. So that's a possibility. I'm not sure until all the nuts and bolts are worked out, and when we know what the price is and what the timelines really are. But this was just a topic that one of the designers threw out, that the timeline for that product may not be conducive to us getting the project done next summer, and I know we want to get the project done next summer. We should have our price early enough to do that, but the big holdup, the holdup would be that conditional vote, possibly. That town meeting, a town meeting date, on when we actually know we have the money.
Okay.
So I'm sure we'll have some discussion as we get closer to that.
I mean, we could add tentative, or we could take it out. It's really just placeholder, because we don't know
Okay.
right now
That's fine.
all that we may need to ask of town meeting.
So the other thing that I wanted everyone to maybe make notes on your schedule, or if we want to put it on the schedule, is that as for the superintendent search, for the calendar that you have in your packet, December 3rd is the meeting when we will be announcing the finalists. And then during December, we will be scheduling additional public meetings and public interviews for these finalists. And then, at some point in January, likely, potentially the January 7th meeting, or it could be an additional meeting, we will have to have a discussion amongst ourselves of these final candidates, and then and that would be on TV. We talked to NESDEC about that, and they recommend that, and then we would be voting on who the final decision is. So, and in our calendar, that vote happens in January. So, likely then, probably the January 22nd meeting, but, we'll see how it all goes. But that's something that is going to take some time, and the announcement on December 3rd should just be an announcement. That's not a big discussion. But the other things, we all need to be aware of that and fit that in with these.
We could do one of two things. We could add some of those things, but they could change. Or is there merit in, we post this really for people to be able to plan ahead that there might be meetings that they want to
Right.
attend?
Yeah.
Because we have to post everything
Yeah.
within the 48 hours anyway. Or does it make sense to, when we post this, we post that timeline with it? I think it would be difficult to incorporate all of the dates here.
Yeah, we
Because-
have an updated, we have to talk about tonight, we have a updated timeline
Yeah,
just for
so
the
I'm just
superintendent
wondering,
search.
should we post
Um,
those so they're formally posted, and so someone looking to see what's coming up on people's agendas would
I mean, maybe
see
we
them?
can just make a note on this, that the topics for the superintendent search are on a separate timeline.
Okay,
Because this
all right,
is
yeah.
like the regular year in, year out.
Yeah, that's a good point, so we
Um,
can add that as a
Just as a
comment.
note for people that, I mean, I was bringing it up more for all of us that don't forget, this isn't the only thing that'll be going on at those meetings that we all have to look forward to, so.
Yeah, but
But
we-
maybe make a note, and we
Yeah.
can put the
And
link
where
to
to find that
the
timeline.
superintendent
Yes, right.
search
Yep.
timeline.
That's a good suggestion.
All right. Do we ever do, I noticed the music program review on April 8th. Do we ever do a fine arts and performing arts program review
You mean-
update? Or are they,
Well, we've
part of
usually
another-
included the drama, because drama is technically a part of the ELA department, so
Mhm.
we haven't done that, but that would be a good way to kind of break down those. It would have to involve the English department as well as the music department,
Okay.
but, that's.
I mean, we don't have, I was just curious if we ever
Yeah.
did, I didn't know if they cycled
We
through
we
every
had
few
not.
years or something.
No,
Okay.
and it's because drama is included.
As part of ELA.
English.
On May 20th.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk about that when we get to.
Well, let's talk more about that,
Okay.
about whether we could do that. I don't want to overburden.
No, exactly, yes, that's what I was
The English
thinking.
department, particularly because that department includes reading, which is huge.
Yes.
Piece of it, but,
Oh, I was just curious.
because they do collaborate too, in some ways.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments on the proposed? All right, thank you. All right, item 6.3, to receive the pre-K through 5 curriculum flyers for the 2018-2019 school year, and hear any comments on the changes from last school year. Everybody's got them.
You can't miss them.
Can't miss them.
To the
They're pretty
colorful
colors.
display in front of you.
Love
This will be brief. There were no significant revisions over the last year. This year, last year, remember we had updated computer science, and we've made some sort of shifts. We've seen no significant revisions relative to ELA and math curriculum. We did make some adjustments, but they're more cosmetic to ensure consistency of language, to make sure we use the correct terms like evaluation consistently throughout. But other than that, pre-K did have some edits, updates, but again, nothing that was substantively different from the previous programs. So they're here for your review, and feel free. We did make some minor adjustments to the elementary terms in third grade, but in fact, I went and looked for this, and we actually don't mention how often report cards are given. So the term issue should not impact because
These are the grading.
2 terms that sort of came up through with 2 terms. So we're just maintaining grade 3 with 2 terms.
I think we made a few changes in the science or the technology curriculum about calling them computer science teachers rather than,
But yeah.
Okay.
but it's very minor.
All right. Okay, great, thank you. They look very
And
nice.
this meets just for the public. We do have policy that says the curriculum will be presented to the committee annually, and these represent the elementary curriculum, and we bring them to you for the beginning of the year because that's convenient in that the buildings use them as part of their
Curriculum nights.
curriculum, like handouts. And then we bring the secondary curriculum to you, grades 6 through 12, through the secondary program of studies. And that usually comes to you at the second meeting in January so that you can offer comments on it just before we have to send it out to be printed. So it's meeting of the policy.
Great.
I just had one question. Are these available online anywhere?
Are they?
Available online?
Yeah, we do put them online. Yeah.
Okay.
So they just came back today. They're supposed to be delivered on Friday, but we retrieved them today. So yes, we do put them online.
Great, thank you. All right, item 6.4, we're going to review plans for our September 15th, 2018 school committee planning meeting. That's our annual Saturday meeting. We're going to start, we'll have coffee and whatnot from 8 to 8:30-ish, but we're going to start promptly at 8:30, and we are going to have a hard stop at 11:30. So, there are a lot of things that we can and should discuss at the meeting. A couple of things, Dot and I met, and we spoke about a few items that we thought would be important to discuss at the meeting. One, we should have some early budgetary conversations, really just around what type of budget we are wanting to present this year, needs-based, level of funding, whatnot, so what type of budget. We thought this would be a good opportunity to start discussing our philosophy on fees. Because we were talking about that, what do we want fees to be? Are they a revenue generator? Are they an offset? So have some conversation around the philosophy around them that then can help us sort of guide what we end up charging for athletic fees, extracurricular fees, kindergarten fees, all of that. So that would be something that part of the agenda. I'd like to talk about the subcommittee goals for the year, what folks have in mind for their subcommittee goals. Do you, Liza, want to do a brief sort of update where we are on our 5-year plan?
Oh.
And I don't know,
Yeah.
may just these are the things, if anything's been.
Actually, it would be a good idea to get consensus
Right.
on that.
Because we have new
plan.
members.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep that pretty brief.
Mhm.
And then, are we gonna talk about some enrollment? You're gonna give us enrollment statistics at
Yes,
the meeting on Saturday?
right.
Okay. in advance of the
Well,
October 1st.
And part of the packet, last year we gave out an awful lot of background material, much of it Liza compiled as the packet, so the packet was fairly thick, so my question is, that some of that is data that's still, valid and useful, is what do we want to provide as background? One of the things that I thought in terms of enrollment is to provide those few pages, and only a few, that are actual enrollment and enrollment projection things that came from the study, as one piece of information. I don't know how much background information do we want to provide? We provided a lot last year. I don't know.
Well, we provided a lot last year because that was documents we had been working on all year
Right,
long
exactly,
as we
yeah.
finalized the 5-year vision. So that
I
was
mean, we
why there
provided, for
were so
example, the
many.
mission and the strategic plan and all of those things, but we
Yeah.
have all those things online, so
Yeah.
I just didn't know how much background
Yeah, that was-
we need. We provided some information about, as we think forward to the budget, of what are the things that we needed last year that we didn't fund. And, one of the biggest things there is that position of human resource director, or personnel director, whatever we want to call it. So do we want to provide some information on that? But to
Yeah,
look
that's-
back to what we proposed last year that was not funded as kind of a starting point, that unless somebody's situation has changed drastically, what we asked for last year that we didn't fund would seem to be a beginning point for planning for the coming year budget.
We did talk in salary negotiations about, at this planning meeting, having Dot update everybody about the
Mhm.
research she's done on the HR director role. So.
And that could come under that, the major thing
Yeah.
in terms of scope of need that didn't get funded was that. So we might,
Okay.
so we have to post for this meeting by Wednesday night since it's Saturday morning early. So let me know if there are particular things that you would like to include as background or rationale. We'll put those together in the next few days.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did today in community outreach, but
On Saturday.
one item that we did want to have in the packet is the Q&A that Liza and Carrie are going to be working on.
Yeah, actually, I was going to suggest, can we just put a bullet of update on superintendent search, and then we can include the frequently asked questions, and
Yeah,
then
we don't
maybe
normally
do a.
put-
We're hoping to have that finalized Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that, like, if we have one agenda item that can cover, that everybody looks at that
Right.
quickly, and then
Right.
if, on what you're presenting tonight, if we can like regroup on that quickly on Saturday,
Mhm.
but just have a
Yeah,
line
but
item.
we don't have another
update.
meeting in October,
Yeah.
so that
Right.
is a reasonable thing to move forward.
And October's full.
Mhm.
All right, so we have to present that by post the agenda by Wednesday,
Wednesday night.
4-ish.
Yeah.
So if anybody has anything that I didn't mention that you really would like to see talk about at the planning meeting, let me know. And then Dot, you and I, I'll come by Wednesday morning.
Mhm.
Do you have time? And we'll go over the final agenda. And some things I may move, like I'll move like subcommittee goals to the end if we don't have time to get to that.
Mhm.
We can always do that
Okay.
as part of the
Thank
things.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let me know by tomorrow if there's anything that you feel that we're missing. Great, all right. Item 6.5, we are to consider the homeschool application of Annelise Ling for the 2018-2019 school year. Do you want to speak to it at all? It's in our packets, the application was in there. Do you have to vote?
I'll make a motion to approve the homeschool application of Annelise Ling, grade 1, for the 2018-2019 school year.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, great, thank you. And then item 6.6, to consider the homeschool application of Emmet Doran for school year 2018-2019.
I'll make a motion to approve the homeschool application of Emmet Doran, grade 1, for the 2018-2019 school year.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great, those are done. Thank you. Item 6.7, 6 and 6.8, and 6.9, we have a number of new appointments and as well as advancements. So there's a number of them this time, so I'm not going to name them all. But congratulations to all. Welcome to the district. We're very happy for those who are here and for those who are moving into new positions. Best of luck. Item 6.1, we have some resignations. I will read those because we will miss these people and we want to thank them for their service. Dorothy Morin, bus driver. Daria Rindone, Kids in Action teacher. Courtney Whamond, paraeducator at PRS. And Katherine Shaughnessy, paraeducator at Foster School. Thank you again for your time in our school district. We appreciate your commitment over the years. Item number 7 is items not reasonably known 48 hours in advance. And Dr. Gallo, you have the textbooks.
We have, yes, the, in your packet is Katie's memo to John with this request. But before we do that, another thing that I should have mentioned at the time of the superintendent's report that I remembered when you mentioned fees for things.
Oh,
I should have commented that in terms of the revenue from the tuitions for kindergarten, we had budgeted, it would be put in our budget an assumption that we would bring in $804,000 or $5,000 in tuitions, and in fact that number as of today is $896. So $92,000 more than we had budgeted is available to offset that program. So that's a good thing.
That's good.
Is that kindergarten?
Thank you.
Hmm?
Do you need to open this?
Kindergarten tuition. So you have the memo from Katie, and John and I both endorse this request. And
So
these-
should they read that?
Yeah,
Is there a motion?
The
Is that the
motion's the
motion?
third paragraph, if you wanted to make that, so,
I'm sorry?
the motion is the third paragraph.
The motion is in the- yes.
above
It's the
part
third
is,
paragraph.
you know, mentioned it earlier about the science text being antiquated, no resale value because Follow won't buy them because they don't meet national standards in the United States, but there was a relationship with a school in Africa through the middle school. Katie thinks that we may be able to do some fundraising and ship those over if they want them.
Okay.
So, you know, I thought it sounded like a reasonable idea, so what the motion essentially does is declares the book surplus and directs me to dispose of them at no cost to Hingham Public Schools, or at the least cost if they should not be, you know, available to go over to Africa if they don't want them.
Okay. Want to make a motion?
Okay.
Thanks,
I'll
Kate.
make a motion to declare surplus approximately 300 science texts for grade 5 from the publisher Harcourt, and direct the Director of Business Services and Support Service to dispose of the texts via donation at no cost to the Hingham taxpayers, or otherwise dispose of such texts at the least cost to the Hingham taxpayers.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Take that from Ed. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Motion
Thank
carries.
you.
Thank you. And thanks to Katie for thinking of.
great.
Yeah, that was
Great.
great.
It's great.
That's nice. All right, item 8, subcommittee and project reports. Liza is we're gonna start with Liza with the salary negotiations.
All right. So we met as a salary negotiation subcommittee with the full school committee on August 30th and did a lot of work on updating the focus groups and the online survey, and also talking about the screening committee. So, in your packets, if you would go to, first we can talk about the focus groups and survey, so if you can open that folder. the first thing I wanted to point out. Oh, wait, we're not gonna do that one yet. Nope,
No, keep going.
go into the
Go up to
Or the top.
the folders.
folder.
The first one.
The top folder, focus, item, yeah.
This
there
one?
we go. Yeah. And then go down to the second one from the bottom, Hingham, Mass timeline.
I think we went the one second from the bottom at the top. We opened the wrong document. didn't we?
I don't have the paper in front of me, so where do you want to go?
No, I'm sorry. If you click back, we just opened the wrong document. It was the second from the bottom. Sorry, I'll just. This one.
There we go. So NESDEC updated their timeline version based on the discussion that we had of the timeline. So this document can then be what we replace on the website
Beautifully.
for the timeline that's there. So I wanted us to be consistent with what people have been looking at. So I just wanted to point out that that was there, and the reason that it's in these, it's the same document is in both of these folders because I was able to put it in there over the weekend and couldn't reach Pam, so so that's why it's sitting in there and not in another place. So we have the updated timeline, so wanted to make sure you knew that. Then we're going back to the focus groups. Oh, shoot. Sorry. I just hit the wrong button. Go. Okay. So, for the focus groups, what we had talked about as a committee is that we will be having 4 focus groups for the public and the general community, and then will we also be having some private focus groups that are exclusive for staff, school staff, school leadership team, and town hall staff and committees. And I have, the purpose of these focus groups are to collect input from the community so that we can create, or NESDEC will then run the focus groups for us and draft a candidate profile for the type of person that we're looking for the job, and then we can use that profile when we're looking at the applications to consider the applicants who best meet that profile. So there is a draft press release in your file too, which is focus groups and online survey version 3, clean copy. And so this explains the process. This press release was drafted based on the NESDEC materials that they had given us. So one, so this press release specifically just talks about the public events. There are separate documents in your file that are invitations to each of the private ones so that we can keep those communications separate. One item that has come up, we have scheduled 2 morning sessions, Thursday, September 27th, and Tuesday, October 2nd. At our August 30th meeting, we had talked about picking locations for them. I called the middle school, Foster, and East School, and these were the dates that worked with their schools. And then also, we had talked about having sort of just geographic access in different parts of the town, so that's why the middle school and Foster would be selected. And then there are 2 sessions that would be more available to working parents. Saturday morning, September 29th, and then Tuesday evening, October 2nd. And the evening one would be here in this conference room. For the Saturday, September 29th, we are aware that the Neff Cure Walk is going on early in the morning. We can't, NASDAQ is not available on September 22nd. And then the following Saturday is Columbus Day weekend, and so that's going to be a good time to do it. But NASDAQ is willing to work with us on the time, and so we're suggesting the walk. We know that there are a large number of people that from the high school community would be involved with that, and others in the community. But we can extend the time of the focus group until noon, or work with that. So the walk would be concluded. These focus groups are also designed as a drop-in activity. It's not intended that you go from the start to finish. And so if we just extend the time, then people could come straight from the walk. It might actually be convenient, and they could come to the
Right, 'cause
cafeteria
it's at
at
Wampatuck.
Wampatuck, and then they would be coming to the Hingham High School cafeteria. So, if everyone's good with that. There is youth football happening that day at the high school, but there's always something going on. I will reach out to youth football and see if we can encourage them to all park in the far parking lot, as many as possible, and not park close to the building, so that people attending the focus groups could use the close parking lot. But, and then the online survey will be available. We had finalized that at the meeting. That will not be posted on the website until the time when the focus groups run, so people shouldn't be looking for that yet, but we'll communicate again right before that goes live, so that the online survey is available if anyone is not able to attend the focus group or wants to add something afterwards. The other thing that I did talk to Rick Swanson about students, because we had all talked about having the students more involved, and I'm going to work with NASDAQ to have a high school student focus group on either September 27th or October 2nd during lunchtime in the senior lounge room, that the students can drop in, and we'll work with Rick on the right students to invite, but that then they can just drop in when they have lunch and eat their lunch in the senior lounge, so it would be convenient for them to contribute. And then Rick will also work with us to send an email to all of the students with the survey, so that if students are interested, they can just fill out the survey on their own electronic device at their leisure. We don't need to set something up in the library for them. So all of the principals have been very cooperative with all the requests that we've been making, and have responded very promptly, so really appreciate everyone's assistance with all of this. So this press release gives a good summary of everything, and this can go out tomorrow, yep, if everyone's good with that. So I just had wanted to explain that time on the 27th, yeah. So, and NASDAQ has followed up with Dr. Gallo about the school leadership team,
We're all
so
set
she
on
has
that.
the plan with that. And then I had been communicating with June Gustafson about the staff. And then there are letters in your packet. There's also the first item, the draft Hingham focus group letters. So there's a letter created for each separate individual groups of people. The first one is if we want to send a message to HEF, Hingham Music Parents Association, the PTOs, any specific groups or organizations that support the schools, or, I don't know, the real estate offices or other businesses that have supported us, that if we want to do a little extra outreach of specific people, instead of just sending the press release, I just drafted this if we want to do emails, and that list of outreach people that we had talked about too. So that's the first letter. And then there's the letter to the Hingham Public Schools staff, which talks about their specific focus group event, and then that they can attend any of the public ones. And then there's an invitation to the Hingham Town Hall staff, and I am still chasing down, coordinating with them. And then there's a specific letter for CPAC, because we'll have an hour session just for them, and you can share this with them on
Tomorrow night.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Right.
So I basically tried to, cut and paste and individualize all of those. So that is the other communication. Let's see, what else on the focus groups that needed to be updated. So in your packet, I have the final press release, and then I had the preliminary one that I had shared on August 30th, and that's why they were in your packet, and the timeline, and then the dates. So that's where we are with the focus groups, so we're ready to go forward on that. So then, on the screening committee. At our August 30th meeting, we had a discussion about the formation of the screening committee. And while the search is the school committee's responsibility, in order to get input from the community, NASDAQ had recommended, and we agreed, to create a screening committee with representatives from the community and the staff to help with the selection of candidates and narrowing down of candidates to present to the school committee. And NASDAQ had originally recommended looking at having about 9 to 12 people on the committee. Don't want to make the committee too big because they have to function and work well with one another. And once we looked at our community and where we wanted to, the representation we wanted, we came up with a group of 15 people. I had relooked at my notes, and NASDAQ also recommended an odd number of people, which we just happened to have, in case you have to break any votes. And that worked out without us thinking about that part of it. So, I'm going to go down to, Dot, if you could go to the second to the last document in the folder. It's called Screening Committee Announcement.
In this folder or the?
In the
School
screening, in the
committee?
item 8 Screening Committee folder.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Let me just.
The Word document down at the, say there, yep, the second one, that one. So this is the draft press release for announcing the screening committee. And then if you could go to the 15 members. So the school committee, at our meeting, we decided that we would have the screening committee made up of 2 school committee members, a central office administrator, 2 principals, elementary and secondary level, 1 department director, 2 teachers, an elementary and secondary level as well, and then 2 public officials, 1 an advisory committee member, either former or current, a town hall staff, senior staff member who's someone that works closely with the schools, 2 parents that are appointed by the PTO presidents, a parent appointed by CPAC, and then 2 at-large members. The school staff members, we're also inviting the principals to appoint their 2 representatives, the administrators union to appoint the department director, and the Hingham Education Association to decide on the 2 teachers. The advisory committee, we will reach out to the advisory committee to ask them to appoint their representative, and then the school committee will invite the town hall staff member, and of the 2 parents, we're asking the PTO presidents to appoint them. CPAC would appoint the special education parent. After those 13 people are named, then there will be 2 remaining members on the screening committee that we are calling at-large members. And we have created an application so that anyone from the community who's interested in serving can apply, and the school committee will then look at the talents and expertise and demographics of the 13 members that are already on the committee, and then look at the people who have applied and have shown interest, and then we will balance out the committee with any strengths, talents, demographics that we feel will then represent the community, and having people who understand the role of the superintendent. And so there is a application form, which we have a couple of minor edits on, but that will be ready to be posted, and we're asking people to fill that out by October 5th. This press release explains the details of this screening committee. This position does require a significant commitment of confidentiality and time. We are having people applying for a job that have current jobs, and so protecting their confidentiality is utmost importance. And time, because for the month of November, we're going to have a lot of work to do with interviewing many candidates and reviewing all the applications, determining which ones we want to move forward, and then interviewing them and discussing them and coming up with the questions we're going to ask. And we will be following the state ethics and open meeting laws for this committee as well. The screening committee, their first meeting will be November 1st. So anyone who's interested in serving, all this information will be included in the press release. We'll post it on the website, and it will also be, summary of it will be included in the application form. Anything else people want to make sure that the community hears on TV besides what they will be able to read?
And then, just to clarify, so the groups that are selecting their own, the PTO, the HEA, the admin, they will have their own format for applying or expressing interest. they wouldn't do it through us,
They-
just to clarify that.
Exactly. They
Okay.
can have their own. If they would like to use the form as an example, they're more than welcome to. Yeah, that it's up to them of how they want to pick their people. Except for like we wanted secondary and elementary representation. And we need them to be able to fulfill the time and abide by the confidentiality requests and other requests. But they can decide how they want to pick them.
Okay.
Oh,
We have a meeting with the principals this Saturday, Thursday.
yes.
And then the second question is, do you have a schedule of all the dates in November?
The screening committee will establish their own schedule of meeting dates.
On November 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
So that it's within them and they'll decide that themselves.
I told teachers to clear their calendar for things, except for Thanksgiving.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also, this, just for the public's knowledge, the screening committee is one step of this entire process. The public has a lot of input and the staff with the focus groups, and we hope that as many people as possible come and participate in that, fill out the online survey. And we have heard from other districts that this candidate profile has helped them then, even once they've hired the candidate, to use that as a basis of new strategic plans. And so this effort has long-standing and broad support for where we go as a district. And then, once the screening committee has named some finalists, then that whole process is then public. And everyone will meet the finalists and be able to ask questions and listen to our deliberations. And so there's one minor part but we want to have 15 people who work hard and represent the balance and the broadness of the community to participate in this and provide information back to the school committee.
Right. Okay.
So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you call it a press release, does that mean that you're going to be submitting it to the Hingham Journal? Or what does that mean?
So, of the other press releases that we've sent out on the superintendent search, we've sent them to the Hingham Journal, the Patriot Ledger, and we've had it go on the Hingham Public School Facebook page. We've sent them to the PTO presidents. We also had discussed having Dr. Gallo send them out over X2 to the specific groups. So the staff one could go out to the staff. And so what I think has been working well, and even as we've been developing, even Carrie and I were working on writing the frequently asked questions. If we, as a school committee, can agree on this press release, if this is the statement, these are the facts we're working with, and then we use this so that all the messaging is consistent, then it's kind of, wherever we send this to, this isn't a press release, this is an information release. Maybe we can term it as that, as opposed to just something for
I just
an
want to know
old-fashioned
what
media outlet.
exactly you were
Well,
including.
yeah, I mean, I think media now can broaden as we're reaching out to as many people as in the community as we can. So. So let's see what else in this. So, did everybody have a chance to? I did update this last night. Michelle had given me some comments on the at-large application form, and I realized I want to make those things consistent. So that's why the red lines were added.
So I did.
This hasn't been updated yet with the new introduction. but the introduction of this is in your packet too.
So I did have a few questions regarding the press release for the screening committee.
Yep.
And maybe everyone can help my memory. I don't have my notes with me. When we talked about the central office administrator position, it says school committee invitation. Who's that invitation going to go to? Was that decided on? Or can the administration choose the person that they want on this screening committee?
We talked about it among ourselves and, believe that most likely should be John. It's obviously not going to be me. Jamie is planning on being a candidate. Suzanne is brand new, so that would be our recommendation, that it be John.
So do we want to leave it the way it's worded?
I left it like this because I hadn't talked to Michelle about
Right.
Michelle even going ahead with
Because the way
that,
I
so-
read this, and I
Okay.
think our readers will read this, is that we are choosing who to invite,
Rather than,
rather than the administration is
Yeah.
making a recommendation or choosing their person, as is HEA and PTO presidents. I just want to be consistent in our message. And so if I was reading this, I would say, oh, so the school committee is inviting someone.
Right, just
versus
as-
the administration is actually making a recommendation to the school committee.
Actually, it should say, to be consistent with the other part of the chart, it should just say school committee as opposed to school committee invitation. But yeah, I mean, that was good.
Just how
That's
I
what I
would
had
read it if
remembered.
I
Yep.
was,
right.
I don't know how everyone else feels about that. Do we want to?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Because,
That makes sense.
So should we write school administration?
Or it can just, oh.
I understand Kay's point is that
Yep.
we want people to know that we are not hand-picking all of the people on this committee.
That's fine.
So the more people, so how can you say that? Because we're inviting someone from central office, but administration will make the recommendation. So, you just say,
Administration recommendation, maybe?
yeah.
Or central office recommendation, something along those lines.
Just put John's name in it.
Or we could just say, I was just thinking, or we could just put John's
Be
name.
done with it.
Because we do, why don't we just do that? Because we already have
Yeah,
put some names in
okay.
here, so yeah.
Done.
And then appointment made by,
Only
maybe,
14
just say
School committee.
recommended, well, I say recommended.
Recommended?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, and then the other one listed here is the town hall senior staff. Do we also want to say recommendation to the school committee? I just want to be consistent again in our messaging. And I
So on that
know
one,
that's a little bit trickier, this one, so.
so that was I had that question a little bit differently, but that's what I just wanted to, appointing the second, AdCom is appointing the first public official, and then are we appointing the second?
We had
Public
talked about,
official?
we had all agreed on who we wanted to invite to do that.
Yes. But if that person wasn't available, were we going to pick I thought we were going to invite the one person, and then if they weren't available, let either the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator pick the person, or
Right.
am I wrong?
That's
Did
what
we
I
always say we were
remember.
going to pick? Do you remember, Carrie?
Yeah, I think we were going to pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
If
thought
it
we were
was-
gonna pick two,
Okay.
but I couldn't, that was one thing that I can.
My notes were mine were like,
So we were
And/or.
focused on, my notes were that we were focused on municipal leaders who know the job of superintendent. And, oh, we did,
I know, that's,
yeah, we did say, that, we could ask the town administrator to appoint a current or a former member of the senior staff, you know, like a retired person. That
Senior
would-
staff, there are
would-
people that they would call department heads likely, or
Yeah, or in the town administrator's
in
Office.
his office, yeah.
So. Yeah.
So that, okay.
But we had all agreed on who we wanted to ask first.
Yes.
I don't know.
I
Like,
know,
this is,
it's, I just wanna make sure it's worded right, so it's,
Can you put that
no one's
name
misled.
and or other designee? Like if
Well, that's what I was thinking. Could you, under appointed by, could you say school committee or their designee for that particular role? So we, if it's our,
Leave it open in some ways.
well, in theory, we are, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but,
No.
you know, if our first choice isn't there, then we'd still be working with the town administrator to identify someone, so we're still involved with identifying that person as opposed to asking the Board of Selectmen to, like, handing it to we're not doing that, we're not handing it to the Board of Selectmen to pick.
You weren't at the meeting, so I know that
I know.
might be hard for Libby, but, as long as we agree.
But does everybody want to leave it as is, school committee?
I think
Okay,
so.
all right,
Okay.
okay.
So you can take the letter I drafted and send it out tomorrow, and maybe we can fill that one in and be done with it.
There you go, all right. That's true.
Okay, so is that it?
Yeah, that was all from mine.
Okay, so I can clean this up, and then this one can, as soon as the online application form is on the website, I would be ready to send the release out. I want to make sure that's there before we send this out, because I don't want to have somebody see this and then go looking for the form. Just, so that would be the only timing on this one, which should be able to get that posted tomorrow, so, okay.
Awesome.
So, that's done. Then, and then in here are all the invitation letters. I don't think we have to go through that. Then, if we can go back up to the top, and the first item, oh, well, that has the, so this is the application form. We'll leave this up since that has this up. The introduction paragraphs I want to look at after this, just because I re-edited it based on the press release. But, so the form is a Google form, and we ask people to fill in their vital information, and then a little bit of resume experience, and then how they've ever been affiliated with the Hingham Public Schools. So even if you graduated from the Hingham Public Schools in 1962, if you can check that off and you're still living in town and you want to be involved in the committee. And then, but then more importantly, as we scroll down, we've identified different areas of the superintendent's job that we're looking for expertise in. And the idea is that the people on the screening committee will know enough about the superintendent's job that they can ask a very concise and specific question to the candidates, and then when they hear the answer, that they will be able to judge how well the person has answered the question. And so these are all the different aspects of the superintendent's job, and from these experiences and expertise, that will help us balance the screening committee. And then we allow people to elaborate on anything above, so we know more about them and their experience. And then we also are asking people to tell us why they want to serve on the screening committee. So that's where we are with that form. And so then this will all magically populate all the responses together for us, so that we can keep track of them. So we'll put that will be on the superintendent search page of the website. And then just for school committee eyes, the first item in the folder, it says at-large form introduction. If you guys can take a quick glance at that. This is revised language from what's sitting on the form now, per Michelle's suggestion.
At the end of November. Further consideration.
Oh, at
Or at the end of November.
That's right, she's in the middle of, you do not want us to display that, correct?
You can, but it's
You
not
don't, okay.
necessary.
She was displaying for the front of the survey, which was, she had said school committee.
Good. Okay, you guys good with that?
Okay with that?
All right.
Do you want to by the end of November?
Yeah,
by the end.
by or at, which one do you want me to use? Michelle caught that one.
Let's go with by.
By? Okay, all right. So I'll cut and paste that onto the form tomorrow. And then I'll work with Michelle in getting the invitations out to all of the people that we want to do the appointments.
Okay.
So those are all done. And for the people that are appointing people, we give you a month, June, it's about a month to be able to gather all the information together. And we give you the deadlines on what we're asking for. So then, Kerry and I at the meeting too on August 30th, we're working together on creating some frequently asked questions so that there'll be a document of using the press releases of just explaining the different aspects of the superintendent search. So that's already begun, and we will have that for the packet for Wednesday for so that on Saturday everybody can take a look
Great.
at those.
Okay.
And we'll get NESDEC to look at those too before we send them to everybody, just so that they're clear on everything. And then I wanted to inform you all that this afternoon I got a call from NESDEC, and in the main packet for the meeting, the second to the last item, item 8, Hingham Ed Week hard copy ad. NESDEC got an opportunity to provide us with a print ad for free in Ed Week the week of October 10th. The deadline for people applying for the position is October 29th. So they drafted this print ad for us from the announcement letter, and we have to confirm by September 26th. So I wanted you guys to all see that, 'cause But this is all just based on the announcement letter. So, pretty,
Okay.
which we had all approved. So, that was very good news. I think the only reason we weren't gonna pursue that was due to cost, but if it's free, I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So, and that's the national edition, too. So, I will let them know that we're good with that. And I think that's all that I have.
All right.
Thank you. That brings us up to date.
All right, awesome.
So.
Let's go
Maybe
to community
community
outreach,
outreach, I would
since
say.
you guys talked
Okay, I'll
about
try
some
to
of
make
this
this
part two.
fairly brief, but we actually met today, Community Outreach did, for the first time, and one of the agenda items that we had was a communications plan. And a lot of the communications plan was built upon what we discussed at the August 30th meeting. So I think we agreed that it would be great to divvy up the work of communicating all the steps, focus groups, the survey, all the different opportunities that people have to become involved. And the way we will divvy that up is that each school committee member is a liaison for a school. So, for example, I'm the liaison for South. So I will reach out to South and talk to the PTO president there and the building principal and find a date for me to come and give an update on our timeline and how people can get involved with the superintendent search. And so I would recommend everyone do that. Now, Michelle, you're the only one that doesn't have a school.
Yes.
And Liza had mentioned also earlier about maybe reaching out to HEF and some of these other kind of not school, but yes
Right,
school
like SNAP,
groups.
HEF, yep.
CPAC, maybe when you go to CPAC.
Yep, I'll mention it.
So I'm kind of going to leave it to you how you want to contact them, but the idea is that this frequently asked question sheet would be a flyer that we're going to use and we're going to hand out to anybody interested, and that'll be a great way to communicate really how to get involved so that people don't have to hunt and search for information. Everything, though, will also be on our website and will be posted on Facebook. I just found out today that we are also on Twitter, so if people prefer Twitter over Facebook, they can follow the Hingham Public Schools via Twitter, and everything that's posted on Facebook will be posted also on Twitter, so you do not have to follow both. Then I think we're going to leave the press releases for the superintendent search with the salary negotiations committee, because Liza's been the liaison with NASDAQ and they're writing those press releases for us. So I think to leave that way, and then community outreach will work more on the social media aspect and the website, getting things posted to the website in a timely manner, and we'll do a couple of blurbs just to remind people that the survey's gone live, or the focus groups are coming up, and for them to sign up, or I guess people don't even have to sign up, they can just drop in. So, but we'll make sure to remind people on when all of that's taking place. And I want to say that's basically it for now.
Okay. So I think on the communication, because I believe everyone has liaison assignments too, so if you're assigned a group, then bring that information to them. And since I don't have a school, if anybody can't make if there's a big PTO meeting or an open house or something that you can't make, let me know and I can probably pop in and go to that. I love going to the schools, so I would do that.
And then Carrie also sent an email today with all of the PTO presidents' names, so if you're not familiar with the new PTO president, you should have that in your inbox for you to reach out
Yes,
to
thanks for that.
the PTO president, because they will know, along with the building principal, when's really the best time to visit.
Right.
Seems to be different from school to school.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but I gave you kind of a copy of
Thank
what we
you.
discussed, and
Did we want to, we had talked about having people go to the open houses when there's at the beginning of them, when there's a gathering of people. Are we gonna do that?
So I reached out to Tony, to Mr. Keaty at East today, and I'm going to be going to the 2 open houses at East, and I promise to keep it very short. but
Yeah.
just to,
So, so do we want to do that
Are
for
those,
the middle school and the high school? And
when are those?
September
It'll be
26th and
Thursday.
October
So there'll
3rd.
be, the question sheet will be finalized by then.
Yeah, we're going to vote on it on Saturday, right?
Right, so
Yeah.
I think that would be good to have before any visits.
Yeah.
yeah, I gotta, let's Carrie and I look at that, because it's kind of long.
Yeah, so cut it down a little.
If we're gonna do a handout. So why don't we look at it of seeing how we can get it as a one-page, two-sided,
Mhm.
like, maybe we can do a condensed version and a long version,
Mhm.
because, yeah, we'll figure that out.
But I think it's just easiest for each liaison to work with their schedule, just to reach out to, obviously, open houses are a good time to go, and.
Yeah, no, I agree, I just,
But I know
Was
that there
that
was a
something that-
difference of opinion from some PTOs when really a good time is, so.
so, and then I was just wondering, so like with the high school, tomorrow night's the freshman parents' night, and then there's the open house. Carlos is away. I'm going to the freshman open house. Do you want me to get in front of the parents for 1 minute and just say, go to the focus groups, watch for this, like, really short? Or do we want to wait and let Carlos do another time? And then Libby had mentioned to me, like, the middle school open house, she's going to be
That's this
away.
Wednesday.
So then,
I mean, we won't even have
Carrie, are
materials
you going to
ready.
be there?
No,
There
and
you go.
the middle school is one of the schools that said that wouldn't work as well with the way their open house is
Right.
structured.
'Cause
But
some of
they
them-
have the,
Do they have?
no, they have the open session at the beginning.
Okay, when they were here.
But they have 2 open sessions, one for
Right,
6th grade
yeah.
and then
So maybe
the other
that's
for
what it was.
I would
Yeah.
just suggest that the liaison reach out and
Mhm.
organize that. And if Carlos isn't there to do it, or Libby's not there to do it.
Yeah,
then
like,
you
do we
can
want
reach
to do
out.
like the person who happens to be there to sub, or do you want to
Right.
do them all? Or do we just not want to do them? Do we want to wait and like,
Is it?
do we want to take advantage of every chance we have?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
As visible as we can, if people are
Yeah.
away or.
I would agree, but do you think, as administrators, it's sort of too late to say, hello, Rick, tomorrow night I need 90 seconds on the agenda?
I don't.
You don't think it's too late?
I don't. I think I wouldn't be afraid to do that if you don't have a piece of paper with you. I mean, I think it's important you get your
Yeah.
faces out in front of the community, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But I don't think you
Yeah.
necessarily need to have, just because there's some
That's
this
what I
week
was
that you
thinking.
won't have
Yeah.
your Q&As and
Yeah.
FAQs ready for, right?
Okay.
But
All
that
right.
shouldn't prevent you getting in front of the
Yeah.
crowds. I don't think so.
Okay. So I was going to do the high school tomorrow night, but if you're
Oh,
going to be.
I'm going to be
No,
there
well,
anyway,
then you
so
can do it, 'cause
you can have a night at
All
home.
right. But can you not do the middle school?
Right.
Then-
That's this Wednesday.
That's this Wednesday?
No, the middle school is Thursday.
Oh, Thursday? Ooh, I cannot do
Sorry.
it Thursday. I could not do the middle school on Thursdays. Anybody?
I can't even.
Thursday?
Thursday's awful.
Thursday's awful. What time is it, June, to start? Sorry.
Parent program for 6th graders starts at 5:45. And we have an hour where parents move, so I think the next, I'm not sure when the 7th Wednesday parent time is, but I think it might be at 7 to give
Okay.
parents who have 6th graders and an 8th grader to go to that all parent.
All right. What time do you think we have a meeting starting at 4 on Thursday? Do you think it'd be over by?
5:30?
All right, I'll reach out to Derek and say,
Maybe
I'm
you
going to
could
try
read
to be
something.
there. Well, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to try to be there. If I can't be there in time, can you just read this quick blurb? Okay, I'll reach out to Derek on middle school. Thanks, June.
Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
Okay, and then just to tie up community outreach, our next meeting is planned for, what was it, October 11th at 11 a.m.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much.
So you want me to talk about policy?
Oh, sure.
Actually, there's not too much to discuss. I did send out an email to both you and Ed about a meeting, which I'm going to try to arrange for the start of November.
Okay.
Just because October is so congested. Unless something is pressing, then let me know, and then we can try to move it forward.
Okay.
So,
She said October.
just let me
All
know
right.
when you're available.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't think I saw that, but I'll go double check. Special Ed Subcommittee is meeting this Wednesday, September 12th at 6 PM at the library in the Fearing Room. That will be the 1 hour prior to
We're
the.
meeting at 6?
Yes,
Oh.
at 6, sorry. 1 hour prior to the CPAC meeting, which starts at 7, which Dr. Vinnis is presenting at. So I've been told we are ending at 7 PM, which is totally fine. We actually have a pretty relatively short agenda for that meeting. How about long-range planning? Anything? I know Carlos isn't here, but
Long-range planning is putting an application into the CPC for some funding to help with the remediation at the citation at the playground at Plymouth River School. The committee was contacted. Carlos and Libby are the contact people on this. They were contacted by Bob Mosier, who's the point person for the CPC committee. And picking up on what Dot mentioned earlier tonight, Libby and I pitched in for Carlos. Libby and I met with Bob earlier today, and Libby did the lion's share of the crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Oh.
So that's in the process of moving along. We have a subcommittee meeting on the 20th at 4 p.m. And then we're going to come back following Thursday, the 27th at 7 p.m. Right.
Is this in September?
great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Libby might want to jump in on her exploits today.
Well, John Ferris filled me in
Yeah.
on the background, and so I plan on filling out most of the form that Bob Mosier needs by next Wednesday, not this coming, but following, on the airplane tomorrow morning on my way to Virginia.
All right.
And I'll send that to you.
We'll get it done.
Awesome. Great.
Related to long-range planning, there is a school building committee meeting that is happening on this Wednesday night. It was planned way last spring before the
Oh,
special ed
So
and
you are having
CPAC
it.
meeting were planned, so that will be here at 7:30.
That's at 7:30.
7:30, yes.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Tomorrow? No, Wednesday.
Yeah,
Okay.
7:30 is correct.
all right. All right. Any liaison reports?
Yeah, just for SNAP.
Yep.
Our fall programs are open. We have 4 of them. So there's the crew program for middle school and high schoolers, yoga Zumba for middle school and high schoolers, and soccer and hockey for ages 4 through 22. So that's up and running. We've had a good response, but it's South Shore SNAP under program offerings. So that should be going. And we have a great group of high school mentors too helping out this year too.
Good.
We're also going to be partnering with the McCourt Foundation. They're doing the tour to South Shore, so we're going to have a team SNAP that's going to be participating. So this organization helps people who suffer from neurological disorders. So the money we raise will benefit both the SNAP and the McCourt Foundation. So that's coming up.
Oh, great. Thank you. Any other liaison reports? No? All right. All right, so just a reminder, our September 15th, this Saturday planning meeting starts 8. Meeting will start at 8:30, but start gathering around 8. And then the next full school committee meeting will not be until October 1st after the Saturday meeting. So, with that, does anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay.